The marketplace was alive with noise, colors, and the smell of food, but in one corner, a scream cut through the chaos. "Thief!" someone shouted, and all heads turned. A small alien girl stood frozen, clutching a piece of bread to her chest. Her clothes were torn, her face was thin, and her eyes wide with terror. People quickly surrounded her, their voices sharp and full of anger. "Liar! Thief! Parasite!" they shouted. Some threw scraps of rotten fruit in her direction. The bread shook in her hands as if it weighed more than she could carry. Two guards, tall and armored, pushed through the crowd. Their boots hit the ground with heavy thuds. One of them pulled out a stun baton that crackled with energy. The girl stepped back, shaking her head, her voice trembling. "Please, I was hungry. Please, not the cage." But nobody listened. To them, she was not a child. She was part of a hated species. Their kind was blamed for stealing, for trouble, for crime. Nobody saw her fear, only the label on her skin. The human stood at the edge of the crowd. He was just an engineer, walking home after a long day. His hands were stained with oil, his shirt plain, his mind tired. But as he watched the scene, something in him tightened. The girl's thin body, her desperate voice, reminded him of something he thought he had forgotten. Memories of his own childhood, when hunger gnawed at his belly and people turned their faces away. He saw her eyes glowing faintly with her alien blood, begging for mercy that would never come. The guard raised his baton. The crowd cheered. "Teach her a lesson," someone yelled. Another voice shouted, "Show her kind what happens to thieves." The girl pressed her back against a stone wall, her hands trembling so badly the bread nearly fell. She shut her eyes, waiting for the strike. Before the baton could fall, a hand caught the guard's wrist. Gasps filled the air. Everyone looked at the human who now stood between the alien girl and the soldiers. His jaw was set, his eyes hard. "Stop," he said. The single word cut through the noise. The guard sneered. "This is none of your business, human. Step aside." His voice was deep and filled with authority, but the human did not move. He glanced back at the girl, still pressed to the wall, her breath quick and shallow. "She's a child," he said. "You'll kill her for bread? That's not justice. That's cruelty." The crowd erupted. Some jeered, some shouted in anger. "She's a thief. He's defending garbage. He must be mad." The human ignored them. His heart pounded, but he kept his voice calm. "If she's guilty, then let her be judged fairly. But not here. Not by a mob." The second guard stepped closer, towering over him. His armor gleamed under the marketplace lights. "Move," he growled. The human did not. He spread his arms slightly, blocking the girl. She clutched the bread tighter, staring at him with disbelief. No one had ever stood for her before. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to speak but could not find the words. The first guard twisted his wrist, trying to break free. Sparks from the baton flashed between them. The human tightened his grip, his muscles straining. He was not a soldier, not a fighter, but in that moment he refused to let go. The air grew tense, heavy, as if the entire marketplace was holding its breath. "Why risk yourself for her?" a merchant shouted. His voice was sharp, mocking. "She's not worth it. She'll rob you the moment you turn your back." The human's eyes flicked across the crowd, filled with suspicion and hate. He spoke louder now, his voice carrying over the noise. "Look at her. Does she look like a thief? Or does she look like someone who's starving? Would you not take bread if your stomach screamed for days?" A murmur passed through a few in the crowd, but most remained hostile. The guard yanked his arm free, pointing the baton at the human's chest. "Last warning," he snarled. "Step aside, or you'll share her fate." The human's heart raced, but he forced himself to stand firm. His voice was steady, even as sweat ran down his back. "If you want her, then you'll have to take me too." The marketplace went silent. For a moment, only the sound of distant footsteps and the buzz of the baton filled the air. The alien girl's eyes widened. Her small fingers loosened around the bread as if she might drop it, but then she clutched it again, holding it like a lifeline. The crowd did not know how to react. Some muttered angrily, others whispered with unease. A few even looked ashamed, though they quickly turned away. The guards exchanged glances. Attacking a child was one thing, but harming a human, especially in front of so many witnesses, was another matter entirely. The guard lowered his baton slowly, the crackling energy fading into silence. "You'll regret this," he spat. He shoved past, motioning to the other guard, and together they forced a path out of the circle. The crowd's anger did not fade, but no one dared move against the human now. They muttered insults, spat on the ground, and cursed the alien girl, but the fire of their rage had cooled. The human turned and looked at the girl. She was trembling, tears streaking her dirty cheeks. For a long second, she did not move. Then, as if breaking from a trance, she darted forward and clung to his arm. Her voice was small, broken. Why did you help me?" He looked down at her, unsure of the answer himself. The crowd still watched, their eyes heavy with judgment. He did not speak. He simply nodded once, then guided her gently out of the circle, his body shielding hers. The people parted slowly, whispering behind their backs. The alien girl walked beside him, clutching the bread against her chest as if it were treasure. Her steps were unsteady, her breaths shallow. Yet she did not let go of his arm. And though the human had only meant to stop one act of cruelty, he felt the weight of the choice pressing on him. He had defended her once, but now, it seemed, the entire colony would never let him forget it. The human and the alien girl had not gone far when the guards returned, this time with more soldiers. Heavy boots slammed against the stone floor of the street, the clatter of weapons echoing like thunder. The girl froze, her eyes wide with fear, and she pressed herself against the human's side as though he were a wall of safety. The human clenched his fists, knowing trouble had only just begun. "Stop right there," the lead guard barked, his voice sharp like a blade. Behind him, a group of merchants and citizens followed, their faces twisted with anger. Some carried sticks, others just their loud voices, but all of them wanted the same thing: punishment for the alien girl. The guard pointed at the human. "You. Hand her over. Protecting a thief makes you no better than one." The human stood tall, even though his heart pounded inside his chest. He could feel the girl's hand trembling against his sleeve, her body so small compared to the armored soldiers. He looked at the guard and shook his head. "She's a child. She doesn't deserve this. If she has done wrong, there are proper ways to judge her. You won't beat her down in the street." The crowd hissed. Someone shouted, "Traitor!" Another yelled, "Why defend her? She'll stab you the moment you sleep." The human ignored them, his eyes locked on the guards. The leader's lips curled into a snarl. "Do you think your words mean anything here? She is guilty, and you are standing in the way of the law." He stepped forward, baton in hand, its blue sparks dancing in the dim light. The girl whimpered softly, clutching the bread tighter against her chest. She whispered, so low only the human could hear, "Please, don't let them take me." The human's jaw tightened. He raised his voice, louder than before, so even the ones at the back of the crowd could hear. "Then let them take me too. If her crime is hunger, then I share it. If her crime is survival, then I am guilty as well." The words struck like a hammer in the silence. The crowd murmured, confused and angry, but they could not look away. The guards shifted uneasily. The law was strict, but to drag a human into the same pit as an alien child would cause questions, even backlash. Some citizens whispered to each other, their eyes uncertain now. For the first time, doubt crept into their voices. The leader sneered and raised his baton higher. "You don't scare me. One human can't protect her forever. If she stays with you, she will only bring ruin to your life." His voice carried a strange edge, almost like a warning. But the human refused to step aside. His chest heaved, but his voice was calm, almost cold. Better ruin than cowardice. The guard lunged forward suddenly, jabbing the crackling baton close to the human's chest. Sparks jumped, and the girl cried out, hiding her face in his side. The human did not move. He did not flinch. His body stood as solid as a wall. "Strike me, then?" he said quietly, though every ear in the square caught his words. "But know the blood will not just be mine. It will be yours, too, the stain of killing the innocent." For a long moment, no one moved. The baton hummed, its energy lighting the guard's armor in sharp blue flashes. The human's hand twitched as though ready to grab it again. The crowd leaned forward, waiting for the first blow. Even the girl held her breath. Then, slowly, the guard lowered the weapon. His eyes were full of rage, but his hand shook slightly. He spat on the ground. "You'll regret this day," he growled. The guard stepped back, but the crowd was not satisfied. "Cowards!" a merchant shouted. "You're letting her go free?" Others yelled in agreement, but the guards gave no answer. They knew this battle, in front of so many eyes, could not be won. The human stand had forced them to retreat, for now. The alien girl looked up at the human, her face pale and streaked with dirt. She tried to speak, but her voice broke into a sob. She had expected him to hand her over, like everyone else always did. But he hadn't. He had stood tall against weapons and hate, even when the world spat at him. Slowly, carefully, she released her grip on the bread and let it fall to the ground. She wrapped both her arms around his waist, her tears soaking into his shirt. The human placed a hand gently on her head. He felt the crowd's eyes still burning holes in his back, but he did not care. He guided her away, step by step, until the noise of the marketplace faded into silence. The girl did not let go of him once, clinging as though her life depended on it. They reached a narrow alley, hidden from the eyes of the mob. The human leaned against a wall, exhaling deeply. His heart finally slowed, though sweat still dampened his brow. The girl sat down on a crate nearby, hugging her knees to her chest. Her eyes never left him. "Why?" she whispered at last, her voice soft and raw. "Why would you do that for me? You don't even know me." The human paused, unsure of his own answer. He thought of the crowd, their hate, their hunger for blood. He thought of her small voice begging for life, the way she had clung to him in fear. He looked at her and simply said, "Because nobody else would." The girl stared at him, her eyes shining with disbelief and something else, something she had not felt in a long time. Trust. She nodded slowly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. For the first time, she whispered her name, as if giving him a piece of herself. And as the evening shadows stretched across the alley, one truth became clear. She would not leave his side. Not now. Not ever. The night air was cold, and the streets were darker now. But the human and the alien girl could not rest. They moved quickly through narrow alleys, their footsteps echoing between stone walls. Behind them, angry voices rose again. The guards had not given up. Shadows moved in the distance, and the sound of boots chasing them grew louder with every turn. The girl's breath came fast, her small hands gripping tightly onto the human's sleeve. She stumbled once, nearly falling, but he caught her before she hit the ground. "Keep going," he whispered firmly. His own lungs burned, but he pulled her along, forcing his tired body to move faster. Every corner they turned, he looked over his shoulder, and each time he saw the same thing: glimpses of armor, torches, and the glint of weapons. They were being hunted. The alleys twisted like a maze. The smell of garbage and smoke filled the air, but the human knew these paths well. He had worked in the colony for years, fixing broken pipes and cracked walls, and he knew shortcuts the guards rarely used. Still, the soldiers were trained, and their voices carried closer with each passing moment. The girl's legs wobbled. I can't," she gasped, clutching the bread tightly. Her thin body was shaking with exhaustion. The human bent slightly, scooping her up without a word. She stiffened, surprised, but then wrapped her arms around his neck, hiding her face against his chest. He carried her as if she weighed nothing, though sweat dripped down his forehead and his muscles ached. A shout rang out behind them. "There! They're over there!" The guards had spotted them. The human pushed harder, his boots striking the ground in a steady rhythm. The girl's heart pounded against him, her breaths uneven, her body trembling with both fear and disbelief. No one had ever carried her before. No one had ever saved her before today. They reached a broken wall near the edge of the lower district. A small gap between collapsed stones led to a hidden passage. The human crouched and slipped through, pulling the girl after him. Dust and dirt clung to their clothes as they crawled through the narrow opening. The voices of the guards grew faint behind them, lost in the echo of other alleys. Inside the passage, the air was cool and damp. Old pipes dripped water onto the stone floor, and faint lights flickered weakly along the ceiling. The girl leaned against the wall, her chest heaving, her large eyes reflecting the dim glow. The human listened carefully, his ears tuned for footsteps. For a moment, there was only silence. "Are we safe?" the girl whispered. Her voice was so small it barely reached him. He did not answer right away. Instead, he looked around, scanning every shadow. Finally, he nodded once. "For now." The girl sank to the ground, clutching the bread to her chest like a treasure she could never let go. She was shivering, though the passage was not that cold. The human watched her quietly. He could see she was not only hungry, she was terrified. Her people had been hunted for so long that even silence felt dangerous. He crouched beside her. "What's your name?" he asked. The girl hesitated, her lips trembling. She had not spoken her name in so long that it almost felt strange on her tongue. But finally, she whispered it. Her name was soft, unfamiliar, yet beautiful. The human repeated it quietly, as if to show her he had heard and would remember. She looked at him with confusion. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why do you help me? Everyone hates us. Everyone says we're thieves and liars. You should have let them take me." Her words were filled with bitterness, but her eyes carried a fragile hope, like she wanted him to argue. The human shook his head. "I've seen hunger. I know what it does. A thief steals because of greed. But you?" He looked at the bread in her hands, then back at her pale, tired face. "You steal because you don't want to die. That's not the same." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time she did not cry loudly. She simply lowered her head, clutching the bread tighter, as if his words had broken something heavy inside her. For a long moment, they sat in silence. Then a sound echoed through the passage. A sharp, metallic clang, like boots against steel. The girl froze instantly, her eyes wide. The human placed a finger to his lips, signaling her to stay quiet. Slowly he stood, moving closer to the corner of the passage. The sound grew louder. Someone was coming. A shadow moved on the wall, stretching longer with every step. The human's body tensed. He had no weapon, only his hands and his determination. He looked back at the girl. She shook her head violently, whispering, "They found us." The footsteps stopped suddenly. The passage fell into silence again. The human's breath slowed, his eyes locked on the shadow. A drop of water fell from the pipe above, splashing loudly in the quiet. The girl buried her face into her knees, her shoulders trembling. Then a whisper echoed through the darkness, faint but chilling. "You can't hide forever." The voice was low, mocking, and filled with certainty. The shadow moved again, then vanished as the sound of retreating steps echoed away. The human exhaled slowly, but the girl still shook. She had heard that kind of voice many times before, a predator's promise. She looked at the human with fear, but also something new. If the hunters came again, she knew he would stand for her. The human returned to her side, crouching again. He spoke softly, his tone steady, even though his heart still pounded. "They won't give up, but neither will I." His eyes held a fire she had never seen before. For the first time in her life, she believed those words. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, nodding weakly. Though the footsteps were gone, the fear still lingered like a shadow in the air. The human stood, offering his hand to her. She hesitated, then placed her small fingers in his palm. He helped her up, steadying her weak body. Together, they moved deeper into the hidden passages. The colony was vast, full of danger and eyes that judged. But in that moment, the girl realized something. She was no longer alone. No matter how many shadows followed, no matter how many guards searched, she had found one person who would not leave her side. And that changed everything. The workshop door creaked as the human pushed it open, guiding the alien girl inside. The place smelled of oil, iron, and old machines. Tools lay scattered across wooden benches, half-finished parts stacked in corners, wires hanging from hooks on the walls. It was messy, but safe. He closed the door quickly and bolted it, making sure no one could follow them in. The girl stood still, her large eyes darting across the cluttered room as if she had stepped into another world. She hugged the bread tighter, though her arms were trembling from exhaustion. The human noticed and sighed. He reached for a kettle on a small heater in the corner, poured warm water into a tin cup, and handed it to her. She stared at it for a moment, unsure if she should take it, then slowly reached out and held it with both hands. The warmth surprised her. She sipped carefully, her lips quivering as the water touched her tongue. Her body relaxed just a little. The human watched quietly. He saw the dirt on her skin, the thin frame of her shoulders, the way her bones almost showed through her clothes. She was fragile, too fragile for the world outside. "Eat," he said softly, pointing to the bread she still clutched. She hesitated, as if expecting him to snatch it away, but when he nodded again, she broke off a small piece and placed it in her mouth. Tears filled her eyes as she chewed. Not because the bread tasted good, it was stale, but because it was the first time she had eaten without fear of being beaten for it. For a while, neither spoke. The girl sat on a crate, eating slowly, while the human sorted through some wires, pretending to be busy, though his eyes kept returning to her. Finally, she lifted her head. They'll come back, she whispered. Her voice was so soft he almost missed it. They always come back. They don't stop until they take us away. The human leaned against the workbench, crossing his arms. They'll try, he admitted. But you're safe here, for now. He knew his words were only partly true. The colony guards had long memories, and they didn't forgive defiance easily. Still, he refused to let her see his doubt. The girl studied him carefully, her eyes narrowed. Why? Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. Everyone else spits at me. Everyone says my people are liars, thieves, dirty. But you? She paused, as if the thought itself was too strange to finish. The human rubbed his hands together, grease staining his palms. He looked down at the floor before answering. Because someone should. Because no one deserves to be treated like that. Not you, not anyone. His voice was steady, but inside he wondered why he cared so much. He had seen hundreds of hungry faces in this colony, but hers had cut through his heart like a blade. The girl lowered her gaze again. She didn't argue, but her hands trembled as she tore another piece of bread. She wanted to believe him, but years of cruelty had taught her better. Yet here she was, in a stranger's workshop, safe for the first time in memory. Her chest ached with feelings she didn't understand: fear, hope, and something close to trust. The human noticed her shivering and pulled a worn blanket from a shelf. He placed it around her shoulders gently. She flinched at first, unused to kindness, but then clutched the fabric tightly. Her eyes glistened, though she quickly looked away so he wouldn't see. Time passed. The workshop grew quiet, broken only by the hum of machines cooling down. The girl eventually set the bread aside, her small stomach unable to handle more. She leaned against the wall, half wrapped in the blanket, and let her eyes close for a moment. The human watched, realizing how young she truly was. Not just in size, but in the way she slept instantly, like someone who hadn't rested in days. He turned back to his workbench, adjusting old circuits. His mind, however, was not on his tools. He replayed the scene in the marketplace over and over. The hatred in the crowd, the girl's terrified eyes, his own reckless choice to defend her. He should have walked away, but something had stopped him. Something deep inside refused to let her die alone. A sudden knock on the door snapped him out of his thoughts. The girl jerked awake, her eyes wide with panic. She scrambled up, dropping the blanket, her body tense like a cornered animal. The knock came again, heavier this time. "Open up!" a voice shouted. It was harsh, commanding, and filled with authority. The girl shook her head violently, whispering, "No, it's them." Her small hands clutched the human sleeve again, just like in the marketplace. Her fear was raw, and he could feel it trembling through her skin. The human motioned for her to stay quiet. He grabbed a wrench from his bench, holding it tightly in one hand as he approached the door. His heart thudded hard in his chest, but his face remained calm. He pressed his ear against the wood. Voices outside murmured angrily. Neighbors, maybe guards. He couldn't tell yet. Another knock slammed against the door, this one so strong the hinges rattled. "We know she's in there!" someone shouted. The girl gasped and backed into the corner of the workshop, her blanket dragging on the floor. Her eyes begged him to protect her again. The human's grip on the wrench tightened. He thought quickly. If he opened the door, they would drag her away. If he refused, they might break it down. Either way, he would not let them take her without a fight. He turned his head toward the girl. She stood frozen, her chest rising and falling rapidly. He whispered softly but firmly, "Stay behind me." She nodded, too scared to speak, and pressed herself into the shadow of the wall. The human squared his shoulders, stepping closer to the door. Another strike shook the wood. Dust fell from the frame. The voices outside grew louder. Threats, orders. The whole neighborhood must have gathered by now. The human inhaled deeply, preparing himself. He knew that from this moment, there was no turning back. By standing for her once, he had already made himself a target. Now, the choice was clear. Either give her up or defend her until the end. The door rattled again, and he raised the wrench, ready for whatever came next. The girl's wide eyes stayed locked on him, and in her gaze was something powerful, not just fear, but the fragile beginning of trust. The next morning, the human was called to the colony hall. A message had been delivered to his workshop in the early hours, stamped with the seal of the authorities. The words were sharp and cold. He was to present himself at once. He knew what it meant. The girl stood by the door, clutching the blanket he had given her. "Don't go," she whispered, her voice shaking. He forced a smile he did not feel and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "I have to. They'll come for me if I don't." She shook her head, eyes filled with fear, but he pulled away and stepped out into the street. The path to the hall felt longer than usual. People stared as he walked past. Merchants paused in arranging their goods. Neighbors leaned from doorways. Whispers followed his every step. "That's him. The fool who defended the thief. He'll lose everything." The words were not shouted, but each one struck him like a stone. He kept walking, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed ahead. The Colony Hall was a grand building, its tall pillars carved with symbols of authority. Inside, the air was colder. The human was led to a chamber where several officials sat behind a long table. Their robes were dark, their eyes sharper than knives. At the center sat the chief authority, his expression stern and unyielding. The human stood before them, his hands at his sides. One of the officials leaned forward. "You interfered with the law," she said. Her voice was calm, but filled with disdain. "You defended a criminal. Do you deny it?" The human did not flinch. "She is not a criminal. She is a starving child. I stopped a mob from killing her." The words caused a stir. Some officials exchanged glances, others scribbled notes on tablets. The chief authority raised his hand, silencing the room. His gaze locked on the human. "You risk your life, your standing, and your place in this colony for her. Why?" The human hesitated only for a moment before answering. "Because it was the right thing to do." The officials murmured among themselves. The chief leaned back, his face unreadable. "Do you know what you have done? The colony depends on order. Her people bring chaos. We have laws for a reason. By shielding her, you insult the colony itself." The human's fists clenched. He wanted to shout, but he forced his voice to stay steady. "Order built on cruelty is no order at all. If your law says children must die for bread, then your law is broken." The room fell silent again. The words hung heavy in the air, daring anyone to challenge them. One official slammed a hand on the table. "Enough! You speak like a traitor." Another added, "Your loyalty is no longer to the colony, but to an outcast." Their anger grew, but the chief authority only watched, his sharp eyes never leaving the human. Finally, he spoke. "Leave the girl. If you walk away now, your punishment will be light. You will keep your home, your work. But if you continue this path..." He leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. "You will lose everything." The human's throat tightened. He thought of the girl waiting in his workshop, clutching the blanket as though it were her only shield. He thought of the crowd, of the baton raised to strike her, of her small voice begging him not to let them take her. Slowly, he lifted his head and met the chief's eyes. "Then I will lose everything, but I will not give her to you." Gasps filled the chamber. The officials erupted in anger. Voices shouted over each other. "Madness! Foolish human! He chooses death over reason." The human stood tall, his decision clear. The chief authority raised his hand again, silencing the chaos. He stared at the human for a long time before speaking. "So be it." His words were like stone. "You are now marked. Your neighbors will turn against you. Your work will be stripped from you. And when she fails you, as all her kind do, you will regret this choice." The human did not answer. He simply turned and walked out. The whispers of the officials followed him, but he no longer cared. The hall doors closed behind him, and the noise of the colony swallowed him again. On his way back, the stares of the people were colder than before. Some spat on the ground as he passed. Others muttered curses. A few shouted openly now. "Traitor! Alien lover!" The words struck, but he did not stop. His steps carried him forward, back toward the small workshop where the girl waited. When he pushed the door open, she was there, sitting on the floor with the blanket around her shoulders. She jumped to her feet when she saw him. "You came back," she whispered. He gave a tired smile and nodded. "Of course I did." She studied his face carefully, noticing the lines of worry etched deeper than before. They want me, don't they?" she asked. He crouched down to her level, his eyes steady. "Yes, and they will keep coming, but I won't let them take you." Her lips trembled, and she looked away, ashamed. "I'll bring you trouble. Everyone says so. Even you will lose everything because of me." Her voice cracked, filled with guilt. The human placed a hand under her chin and gently lifted her face so she would meet his eyes. "Maybe I will. But some things are worth more than safety. You are worth more than their hate. Her tears spilled then, rolling down her cheeks. She threw her arms around him, holding tight. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen her over fear, over safety, over everything else. She could not speak through her sobs, but she didn't need to. He understood. That night, as the colony settled into uneasy silence, the human sat by his workbench, repairing a broken circuit with the girl curled up nearby, finally asleep under the blanket. The threats, the anger, the loss of his place in the colony, all of it waited outside his door. Inside, there was only the quiet breathing of a child who had finally found someone who would not let go. And in his heart, he knew the fight was only beginning. The workshop was quiet, except for the soft crackle of tools and the low hum of old machines, but the human's mind was far from calm. He worked late into the night, repairing broken wires and circuits. The alien girl sat close by, wrapped in the blanket, her eyes heavy with sleep, but refusing to close fully. She was afraid that if she slept too deeply, she would wake up alone. He noticed, but said nothing. Instead, he slid a broken console toward her and asked, "Can you hold this steady?" She blinked in surprise but nodded, her small hands trembling as she gripped the metal. To his shock, she did not just hold it. Her thin fingers moved quickly, pressing parts he had not shown her, adjusting settings on the panel. A faint glow came alive on the console, something he had been struggling with for hours. His brows furrowed. "How did you?" He stopped, watching her hands continue to work. Her eyes focused, sharp and confident, so different from the timid girl clutching bread in the market. She looked up at him briefly, afraid she had made a mistake. "I used to watch my father," she whispered. Before they took him. He fixed things like this. I remember." Her voice cracked at the memory, but her hands kept moving. With a soft click, the console lit fully, sparks gone, the circuits whole again. The human stared, speechless. She had just repaired in minutes what he had struggled with all night. "You know machines," he said finally, his voice low with amazement. She nodded slowly, biting her lip. "Not everything. But sometimes I understand them, better than people." She looked down quickly, ashamed, as though expecting him to laugh or call her a liar. But he did not laugh. Instead, he leaned closer, studying the glowing console. "You just saved me hours of work." For the first time, her lips curved into the faintest smile. It was small, fragile, but real. She clutched the blanket around her shoulders tighter, as though the smile itself might draw punishment if she showed too much. The human leaned back, still shocked. If the colony knew what she could do, they would not call her a thief. They would see her as valuable. Yet he also knew the truth. They would not lift her up. They would use her. They would take her knowledge, squeeze it dry, and then throw her away. That thought made his chest tighten with anger. Before he could say anything more, a heavy crash shook the door. Both of them jumped. The girl's smile vanished instantly, her body curling in fear. The human grabbed a wrench from the table, his heart thudding. Voices shouted outside. "Open up! We know she's in there!" The guards had returned, louder and fiercer than before. The girl's face went pale. She shook her head violently, whispering, "Please, don't let them." Her words broke into sobs. The human crouched before her, his eyes steady. "I won't. Trust me." She clutched his arm tightly, as though her grip alone could keep him from being torn away. The door shuttered again, dust falling from the frame. The human looked around quickly, his mind racing. He spotted an old hatch near the floor, half buried under tools and spare parts. A maintenance tunnel. He had used it once, years ago, when he needed to fix underground pipes. He shoved the tools aside, yanking the hatch open. A stale draft of air rushed out, carrying the smell of damp stone. "In there," he told her firmly. She shook her head, refusing. "Not without you." The pounding on the door grew louder. The hinges creaked dangerously. The human grabbed her shoulders, his voice sharp but not unkind. "Listen to me. Go. I'll follow." Her tears streaked her dirty face, but she crawled into the tunnel, clutching the blanket around her. The human pulled the hatch closed just as the door burst inward. Splinters flew across the workshop. Guards stormed inside, batons raised. Their armor gleamed in the dim light. The leader stepped forward, his face twisted with triumph. "Where is she?" The human stood alone in the center of the room, wrench in hand. He said nothing. The leader sneered. "You think you can hide her? You think you can defy the colony forever?" The human's knuckles turned white around the wrench, but he held his ground. One guard kicked over a crate, another smashed a shelf. They tore the workshop apart, searching every corner. The girl, hidden beneath the floor, pressed her small hands over her mouth to stay silent. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought they would hear it. She heard boots thundering above her, metal clanging, the crash of broken tools. She curled tighter into the blanket, whispering his name in her head, begging him to be safe. Finally, the guard stopped. The leader turned to the human, his eyes cold. You can't protect her forever. When we find her, she will be caged. And you will be ruined. With that, he motioned for the soldiers to leave. One by one, they stomped out, leaving the workshop in ruins. The human stood still until the last footsteps faded. Only then did he drop the wrench, his chest heaving. He hurried to the hatch and pulled it open. The girl crawled out slowly, her face wet with tears, her body shaking. She threw herself into his arms, clinging desperately. I thought they would take you, she whispered. He held her tightly, his hand resting on the back of her head. Not while I'm breathing. She sobbed into his chest, but beneath the fear was something else, relief. He had not given her up, even when his home was nearly destroyed. She looked up at him with wide, wet eyes. They'll keep coming. They'll never stop. He brushed a strand of her tangled hair away from her face. Then we won't stop either. His voice was quiet but firm. The fire in his eyes burned brighter than ever. She stared at him, her tears slowing, her breathing steadier. In that moment, she believed him completely. The night stretched on, the workshop broken and scattered, but inside its walls something stronger had been built. She was no longer just a frightened girl hiding from the world. She was someone with rare knowledge, someone who mattered. And by her side was a human who had chosen her again and again, even when it cost him everything. That bond, fragile but unbreakable, was what gave her the courage to whisper softly, I'll stay with you, always. The hall was crowded with voices, a storm of anger and judgment echoing from every wall. The human pushed through the heavy doors, his steps steady though his heart pounded like a drum inside his chest. At the far end, the alien girl was forced to kneel on the stone floor, her small wrists bound, guards standing on either side of her. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, but when she saw him enter, something flickered there. Hope. The chief authority sat high on a raised seat, surrounded by officials. Citizens filled the benches on either side, whispering and pointing. Some spat insults at the girl, others laughed cruelly. Thief. Parasite. Let her rot. The girl lowered her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. She had expected this. She had lived her whole life under these words. The human walked forward until he stood in the center of the chamber. The guards moved to block him, but he raised his voice so it carried across the hall. She is not a thief. She is not what you call her. His words silenced some whispers, though others hissed angrily. He stood tall, his back straight, his eyes fixed on the leaders. She has skills that could save this colony. She repaired machines you could not fix. She is not garbage. She is hope. The crowd erupted. Some shouted denial, others laughed, but the human did not waver. He pulled a small device from his bag, the console she had fixed, and placed it on the table before the officials. This was dead, he said. She restored it, in minutes. None of your engineers could do it. Tell me again she is useless. The device hummed to life, glowing softly in the dim light of the hall. Murmurs ran through the chamber. One official leaned forward, suspicion in her eyes. Tricks! She must have tampered with it before. The human's voice rose, strong and unyielding. No trick. I watched her. She carries knowledge passed from her father, knowledge you tried to erase when you pushed her people into the dirt. His words stung, and several officials shifted uncomfortably. The truth was dangerous, but he spoke it anyway. The chief authority's eyes narrowed. Even if this is true, it does not change the fact that she broke our law. She stole. She took what was not hers. The human stepped closer, his voice steady but sharp. She stole bread to survive. If survival is a crime, then judge us all, because every one of us would have done the same with an empty stomach and no one to help. The crowd fell into silence for a moment. The truth of his words struck deep, even if many refused to admit it. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others clenched their fists, unwilling to change their hatred. The chief authority leaned forward, his voice heavy with warning. You defy the colony again. You risk everything for this creature. Do you understand what you are doing? The human did not blink. Yes, I am asking for her freedom. More than that, I am demanding it. His voice thundered, filling the hall. Gasps spread through the crowd. The officials exchanged hurried whispers, but he did not back down. His eyes burned with fire, his chest heaving as he spoke the words that had been locked in his heart. If you take her, then you take me. If you cage her, then you cage me. I will not let her stand alone. The girl's head jerked up, her mouth parted in shock. Tears glistened in her eyes, but this time they were not from fear. No one had ever spoken for her like that. No one had ever called her worth defending. The chamber shook with voices, some outraged, some uncertain. The chief slammed his hand on the table. Silence! The noise died instantly. He looked at the human for a long time, his gaze like ice. Finally, he spoke. If she is free, the blame will fall on you. If she fails, the punishment will be yours. This is the price of your defiance. Do you accept it? The human's answer came without hesitation. Yes. The chief studied him a moment longer, then leaned back. So be it. Release her. Gasps and shouts filled the hall. The guards looked uncertain, but the chief's order was final. They cut the ropes from the girl's wrists. She stumbled to her feet, her legs shaking, and for a moment she could not move. Then she ran forward, straight into the human's arms. He caught her, steadying her trembling body as she buried her face against him. The crowd's voices rose again, anger, disbelief, curses, but the human did not hear them. All he felt was the small weight of the girl clinging to him, refusing to let go. He rested a hand on her back, his jaw set. The fight was not over. There would be more battles, more hate, more danger. But in this moment, he had won. He had pulled her from the edge of darkness and given her something she had never known before: safety. They walked out of the hall together. The crowd parted slowly, their eyes full of fire, but no one dared touch them. The girl's hand was locked around his, her grip unbreakable. She did not look back at the place where they had tried to destroy her. Her eyes stayed forward, fixed on the man who had given her a future. Outside, the air felt different. The sky was wide, the light brighter than she remembered. For the first time, she breathed without fear choking her chest. She leaned closer to him and whispered, almost too softly to hear, "I will never leave you." The human looked down at her, his eyes tired but burning with quiet strength. "I know," he said simply. Together, they stepped into the uncertain streets of the colony. The world would not accept them easily. The dangers were not gone. But they had each other now, and neither would walk alone again.